Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Crypto Chronicle Podcast. Actually, it's a bit different with the headphones off.
I know. Yeah, excuse us. It's our first time without headphones. Yes. We're just trying it out.
And we are excited to tell you all that the podcast will be shifting rooms next week.
I know.
We'll be having a different layout.
The curtains will unveil.
Which will be exciting. So hopefully all of you will appreciate the change too. But for now, we're sticking to the normal podcast, the ETF podcast.
Oh, here we go. Bring it out. Come on.
Alrighty, well, the main ETF news this week is obviously in about 24 days, roughly, Australian days. The SEC is anticipated to reject the Spot ETF. Obviously, we've been speaking about that kind of the last few weeks and how it's expected to be rejected. And really, the reports are suggesting that it's still likely to be rejected. Obviously, the foundation being investigated, the SEC, the SEC.
Yeah, exactly.
So our great man Eric gave it a 35% chance of approval. Obviously, as we've kind of said on the podcast, we've been behind BlackRock and kind of, you know.
Could this just be like the biggest false hand we've ever seen?
I don't know. I think there's, look, I'm pretty, I won't say certain, that's the wrong word, but as I said in prior ones, when they're not asking for comments and they're not asking for improvements, I think that's when
you either nailed it or you're screwed.
Yeah. And I think in their cases, they're really stubborn, and that's more them saying, we don't want to help out. We don't want to help you get this approved. That's just, in a sense. So, and which is all interesting because at the same time, obviously, Hong Kong have just approved the Spot ETFs as well. It wasn't just Bitcoin. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of how, I suppose if that has any bearing. They obviously launched tomorrow officially. It's the 30th of April they launch, but obviously I think they're slightly behind. Actually, no, I guess Asia time.
It's already launched,
so maybe they have already launched, okay. Which brings me to my next piece, which obviously we discussed yesterday, and it was a big piece of news that came out in Australia, is that the ASX are looking to now finally approve Spot Bitcoin ETFs in Australia.
Was that 2025?
So it's end of 2024, it says, but I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously, we've spoken about monochrome in the past, and Jeff Yu and what they've been trying to do for their Spot Bitcoin ETF. And I think, obviously, as we've said, there's been one in the past in Australia, but it hasn't required Bitcoin to be held in Spot by the organizations. These are the ones that obviously are going to have that. As we know, I think the US ETFs now have attracted $53 billion in investments. So now companies like BetaShares, DigitalX, VanEck are amongst the players eyeing the Australian market. Obviously, we're not going to have, I think when you look at it from the surface level, you probably say, oh, it's just Australia. You know, we're a very small fish in the pond, we are. But then you read more about how, you know, there's 2.3 trillion in superannuation. And once you kind of work out the maths in your head, and even if it was, you know, a 0.5% allocation per superannuation,
still a large chunk.
It still adds up to a lot of liquidity coming to Bitcoin, doesn't it? And not only that, it creates a whole new wave of investors too, which is always good because obviously, as we know, particularly with the boomer market and a lot of older people, is that they're not willing to just log into your CoinStash or your Binance or whatever it is and try and figure out, how do I get this in my wallet? How do I hold it? But I'm sure, you know, if they walked into their KPMG office with their partner that's been doing their books for 40 years and he says, I think it's pretty good, you should have a, you know, just in case a 0.5% allocation to Bitcoin and ETH or whatever it is in your portfolio, he just goes, no worries. This is a bit different then, isn't it? So I think that'll be the good thing about it. But we'll keep you updated on that as it moves. But for now, that's the news. It should be end of 2024, So we'll see how that goes. But moving on and what did you say something?
I said fingers crossed.
Yes, fingers crossed. Moving on, we kind of have spoken about regulations in Australia and the lack of innovation and how kind of the restrictive regulations, or it's probably better to put the lack of thereof of regulations, has meant that innovation is stifled, and we obviously haven't been emerging as, you know, a hub of crypto, I would say. You know, recently, you know, if you're in the crypto scene and particularly in the social kind of one, I look to events like Token 2049 that was just held in Dubai. It's held in Singapore next time. There was another conference that Callum Will attended. I can't remember what it was called.
Wasn't it Blockchain Life or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. So they had a number of events recently, and you know, I looked at Dubai, and you know, you compare against Australia, and you go, it's just such a large difference, isn't there, in what type of nations really encourage that type of tech innovation. I read a really good comment before that Dubai is coming what San Fran was for tech and the internet in its early days, and it's trying to encourage people to start building there. There's no income tax there, obviously. That obviously favors a lot of cryptocurrency.
Oh, very much.
Traders, investors, and builders.
Location-wise, because,
geographically. I mean, logically, we even look to what Joe Biden tried to introduce in the last week, and even if you're heavy into crypto and your Bitcoin, and you wanted to continue prospering the industry, do I want to sit in America and cop a 25% unrealized tax on my Bitcoin, or do I want to go to Dubai where nothing of my assets is touched?
No thanks, Joe.
Yeah, no thanks, Joe. So, I think, despite... And I think Australia does have a lot of crypto talent, right? Like even Thorchain, Rune Derives is built in Australia. Yeah. We've got heaps of other projects. Obviously, Equalizer. Blake is a guy that we've had on Will's interviewed on YouTube for those that want to go back and watch that. There's plenty of huge...
There's a huge NFT community, everything.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a huge scene here. Yeah. But... we can't stress enough how much clear guidelines and legislation is what is required to foster growth.
But we said this 2 years ago, though.
Yeah, we have.
On the exact podcast, we remember talking about how the regulatory control, not only just within Australia, but in the world, was obviously so cloudy and lacked innovation and direction. And I feel like Australia particularly is in the exact same damn spot where nothing's changed.
Yeah, well, Coinbase's Asia Pacific head, who is John O'Loughlin, actually said that you only have to really kind of look at the dialogue that's occurred between Coinbase and the SEC over in America and how shitty that's been. Like, they've been suing each other constantly for 2 or 3 years now, not getting anywhere. And it's all over just because there's a lack of rules. Yeah. And he's kind of saying, Australian policymakers, if they don't, go in the opposite direction to what the SEC has done, not be hawkish and not try and shut everything down, then there's going to be a lot of hurdles and innovation's going to get dampened, and I don't think it's something that we want to do. Obviously, we're a bit biased here, but it's the type of innovation you don't want to fall behind on.
Well, it's just also more or less, you're just finding by stampering in and slowly doing innovation. Yeah. Realistically, there's going to be more grey area that creeps in because of that. Of course. And we don't want that.
No, really. We don't. But the good thing is, I'm not too sure about what these are, but it's worth saying that Australia has actually entered the league of having over 1,000 Bitcoin ATMs. Now, funnily enough, we were at our recent conference, which was just the Australian Crypto Convention, wasn't it? That's what it's called officially.
Yeah, Melbourne,
we had them next to us, didn't we? I can't remember what the company was called. Can give you a free shill if I remember it. Can't remember it.
No, that weekend's a blur. Yeah, there's too many people.
The interesting thing is, but it kind of, the reason why I put this in is because, over 25 to 30% of Australians trade or invest in cryptocurrency. That's a large chunk in comparison to world view. So 5% of the world is invested, 30% of Australia is. When you look at just that data set alone, not taking anything into account, then we should probably be pretty desperate to get on top of this, right? Then, I place this in because it just goes to show Australia has the third number of Bitcoin ATMs in the world. I know they're just Bitcoin ATMs. It doesn't have a bearing on anything, but what I'm trying to say here is like, there's enough people interested for these machines to be in Australia working and people using them, but we don't want to innovate and we don't want to put the guidelines and policies in place to, not allow this company to prosper, but others.
Have you ever used one?
Huh?
Have you ever used one?
I've never used one.
No,
I think Cal's used one, but overseas. I think he said in Europe once or something. Jeez. And, it was something ridiculous. Like he did $500 and, there was a $100 transit.
It was
how else are the ATMs going to make a clip on the Bitcoin?
Yeah.
But it's just another interesting point to say here that they're only behind the US and Canada in terms of Bitcoin ATMs, us. So as a country, so interesting to see that. Interesting to see how many people really are. And the Reserve Crypto Index actually did do a survey which indicated that in 2024 currently, the way it's tracking, we will overtake the 2021 peak in terms of Australian users of crypto. And that's whether or not we have a peak soon or not, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So it's very interesting to see it like that.
Yeah, very much, yeah.
But moving over to the US now, to our man CZ. This was a bit of older news from late last week after we did the podcast, but they've recommended a 36-month jail term, obviously, for CZ. This is obviously relating to his money laundering guilty plea. For those that don't know, obviously, CZ kind of started an exchange, probably didn't expect he'd have the largest exchange on earth, didn't understand the rules, went through, just ran his exchange everywhere.
Does that mean he's going to be in jail with SBF?
Well, they won't be in the same jail.
Why not? They could create a whole new exchange. Token.
Well, to point there, a reminder that he was a majority shareholder in FTX. CZ was.
Yeah, no, but they could create
and
a
he dumped his
they could create
500
a whole
million
new one.
FTT tokens, and that's what did
imagine how much Solana they'd be trading in there together.
But he remains on a $175 million bond.
Jeez.
And he has been charged, obviously, with a huge fine and that $4.3 billion fine. But I think, it's actually the sentencing date is tomorrow American time. So I'll update with an article tomorrow for those newsreaders, and we'll see actually what CZ gets given. I suspect it'll be between 18 to 36 months.
Is he still in the US?
No, because he wasn't allowed to get extradited to Dubai, where he's Dubai, where his residency is. But I don't know if people have seen, but recently, if you follow him on Twitter, he's been building a new crypto educational platform. That's what he's going to be doing from now on. His passion is educating people in crypto, which is actually called the Giggle Academy. And what he's doing is kind of building like a crypto academy, but for kids. So, which you're making faces at now, but 10 to 15 years, they're going to have to want to be teaching it most likely.
Skepticism in me just says a new wave of people to scam, but I love CZ, so it's not him.
Anyways, I'm just glad he's continuing to build because that's what he does best.
Yeah, 100%.
Over the weekend, another interesting point happened without raising PTSD, but last year in February and March, we had those bank collapses.
I don't want to look back.
We had those bank collapses, which actually, it was bearish at the time, but bullish for a sense of cryptocurrency because it's just showing that these banks, they don't have your funds.
No.
They're not real. And it's funny to see the insurance policy over there. Remember how you're only insured by the FDIC up to 250K?
Yeah.
So if you've got 400K and you're with First Republic Bank, so you have 500,000 in your bank account with them, it's just the weekend and you've just looked at the news and they've liquidated themselves and gone under. The government will give you 250 grand and you will say, I had 500 grand with them, and they'll say, you've just lost 250 grand.
Have you looked at Australia's?
No, what is
100.
Okay.
So we are more screwed.
Yes.
So don't look at it. It's daunting.
Which is actually less than you think, because that'd be what, 70,000 US equivalent? Maybe 65,000?
Yep.
65,000, yeah.
Yep. Australian Federal Reserve. Yep, exactly right. Not great.
This does mark the first shutdown of a US bank this year. And obviously the FDIC has seized the bank on April 26 and absorbed the deposits and assets. They did have $6 billion in assets and $4 billion in deposits. So that's a $2 billion difference though. So this obviously comes after 5 bank failures last year. And as I mentioned, whilst it's kind of bearish and it did spook the market, you have to remember that this is, whilst you look at it in its entirety, fundamentally it's bullish for crypto because it shows you how untrustworthy even these governments can't save your banks and your fiat money that's spiraling out of control, losing all its value that's sitting in the bank anyway.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And at the end of the day, what you have in your crypto wallet is yours. That is your custody. That will always be yours. As long as you keep the keys to yourself and your wallet to yourself, no one can take that from you. Unfortunately, just because you think you have a PIN code to your ANZ app on your bank, if ANZ went under next week, you've only got 100 grand of it. If you've got $1 million in there, you've just lost 900 grand. So, yes, the US is in a bit of a state at the moment, I would say. Obviously, with these policies coming out from Biden, they've got the election coming up. There actually is a interest rate decision tomorrow, which I expect will be a pause. Only because there's no way they're cutting with inflation going back up. Obviously, some people are calling for interest rates to continue upwards, but you're seeing what is happening in the banking sector with interest rates so high. The bond market is turning over. If you look at yields, the US 10 yield, a 10-year yield and 2-year, it's pretty ugly. And you have some merit to kind of be worried macroeconomically, but I would say later in the year as opposed to right now.
We were expecting this, weren't we?
Huh? Yeah.
We were expecting
this. Yeah, we were always expecting. I think if you listen to our podcast in the early days, even a lot of my Trading Academy members will remember that I was saying there is a recession coming. It's just not what the mainstream media are telling you when it will happen. Whenever they were telling you that it was going to happen all of 2022, or towards the end of 2022, start of 2023, stock markets are up 40%. Bitcoin is at all-time highs. Gold is at all-time highs. Yeah. If you had followed the mainstream media from 2023 onwards, you would be dead broke. And so I think when you'll find that when the stock markets continue to rise, when cryptocurrency continues to rise, you'll start seeing the front page of the newspaper talking about how good we are economically, and that's probably when you want to begin selling. Yeah, literally, yeah. Anyways, moving on from the US macro, but back to Bitcoin. 68% of total Bitcoin transactions recently have been comprised of runes transactions.
Yep.
Obviously, for those that don't know, we did speak on it last week, I think.
Yeah,
briefly.
we did briefly.
Yeah, it's a novel token standard, obviously on the Bitcoin blockchain, which has rapidly become dominant.
Yeah, exactly,
and really popular. So it's comprised of over 2/3 of the transactions since post halving, and obviously it got launched on halving day.
Yeah,
As soon as the halving happened. So I think this article is slightly old, so the statistics are slightly out because it was written according to the time, but there was over 2.38 million transactions processed, and runes accounted for 68% of them, including peer-to-peer transaction, BRC20s, ordinals, and runes, so including all of them in one.
Yeah.
On the 23rd of April, runes peaked with over 750,000 transactions, but dropped significantly to 312,000 the next day. And obviously, for those that probably are involved in this know this, but it's been somewhat an NFT and meme coin craze on it, hasn't it? Because everyone tries to the vaporware at the start.
Yeah.
You can't have a legitimate project built on runes, given it's been out for a week or two. So what are you going to develop on it? You'll get a funny NFT picture or a meme coin and just run with that.
Yep.
So I think it contributed to 70% of fees on mining on the halving day of miner awards.
Yeah, literally, yeah.
And then it's kind of fluctuated between 30 to 70% thereafter, I think.
Yeah, it's tapered off quite a bit now.
Yeah, so I guess it's interesting to see how it moves forward. And for those that are in the trading community, which I'll speak on soon, the changes there, I'll be doing a research report on runes, how to approach it, how you can trade on it, what I'll be looking for in the future. I personally haven't jumped the gun. I know everyone's kind of, you want to get knee deep and get into the projects early, but as I mentioned, I feel like if you're allocating, I'm just random figure here, $10,000 towards rune, and you put it into a lot of projects, I feel like majority of them will rather go to zero because they're not actual projects, as I mentioned. They're vaporware or people just going for a money grab early. I really want to see a really good project come to it, and then hopefully I'm in those early. But
got to stick on that ICP.
Yes. Well, you made a good point, obviously, last week of how internet computer is so they're integrating runes onto their network and then,
so it'll bring DeFi in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which we'll look into more. Maybe I'll mention in that research report. But moving on as well is in the wake of the Bitcoin halving, we had a daily transactions record too.
Yes.
So we had a daily transactions record of 926,842 within 3 days, which surpassed the previous high of 731,000 December 2023, which was that obviously ordinals based?
Ordinals based.
So once again, just following on from what we just spoke about, this obviously is because of runes and coincides with the runes release. As mentioned, it dominates pretty much the transactions, around 30 to 60% on any, or to 70% on any given day. So yeah, it'll herald a new kind of exciting chapter for Bitcoin, won't it? One that I'm excited. Me and you had a small chat about it, and I briefly thought about it, and I thought, you think of Ethereum, you think of all these layer 2s, you think of everything, but if majority of people are Bitcoin maxis, or let's just say 99% of crypto enthusiasts believe in Bitcoin, then, and there's going to be DeFi in Bitcoin, then you'd probably be pretty silly to fade the narrative, wouldn't you? And that's the thing about most crypto users. For instance, me and you, we might really like Solana, and we like what's built on Solana, but we don't like what's built on AVAX. On ADA, on Cardano. We'll never use Cardano, me and you. Whereas everyone will use Bitcoin. Yeah. That's my point. So
there's
you're
no
fading
bias,
the one narrative or the one development sector where every single user in crypto uses, or let's just call it 99. I'm sure there are Bitcoin haters out there that are only on Ethereum and refuse to bet. I think that's my point. So that will be a large focus of mine in coming months, and definitely the trading academies. Lastly, whilst we were on Solana, I did an article yesterday. CoinShares is a really good organization that releases a lot of data on inflows and outflows of different projects, particularly in institutional investment. And really, this article was talking about the notable rise in allocations to Solana in particular. So there's been a huge amount of optimism from institutional investors, with now 15% now invested, a significant increase from January. So I think January was really when Solana really started to heat up, didn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously got the meme coin craze. But, versus I think other projects is what's important. So XRP saw a significant decline with pretty much no respondents institutionally holding it. But they've received minor inflows. Obviously, Bitcoin remained the top choice, followed by Ether, but I'm pretty sure Solana is in a very strong third. And I think with altcoins and altcoin inflows, I think regulatory concerns still remain a barrier there, so they're not always going to get a huge amount of inflows. But I think the point here that I'm saying is the optimism is there, and that's what's important. Because we need institutional investment at the end of the day, regardless of what people think.
Liquidity is king. Yeah,
exactly, and that's what. That's what the world is that we live in. So, unfortunately, there are black rocks and there are, everyone here to play now, and we should just play accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But let's move on to technical analysis now that I've talked about it. And really, there isn't a heap for me to say. The choppiness has continued. Yeah. Our IW sign is slightly red for the theme of the week, is that we were $66,000 last week, and we are, do not have my phone on.
63
to 64 today, with a low of 62 yesterday. And it's just chopping people up, and you'll notice, like, if you go and looked at the price of Solana 2 days ago, it was $140. If you look today, it's $140. But the Bitcoin price has done this, and chop. Ethereum went up and it went down, and leverage traders and spot rotators are getting chopped up. But what the important thing is to understand what I said last week, in that the last 6 of the 7 weeks have been red, which is, you think about that and you go, holy shit. We've literally, it feels so bearish, doesn't it, when you say that? Like, 6 of the last 7 weeks, we've had red weekly candles, but we have not closed a singular day below 60,000. I think that's the point I want to make, because it's incredible strength against the tide to hold a level like that. When you're constantly getting aggressive selling to that level, but it rebounds every single. So how many? We bounced 4 times from there now, officially.
Yeah.
4 or 5 times from 60k level. And you know what? I'm not saying that it continues to hold. We might get a sweet dip just below it, but my point being is that I think May does bring prosperity. I've spoken at length in the Trading Academy, but on this podcast, about how tax payments, quantitative tightening. We've obviously had war fears this whole entire month that have caused huge daily dumps of $4,000 to $5,000.
Yeah.
The TGA, and so my point is here is when all these kind of fundamental bearish things subside, what is going to hold price down? I don't think too much, and you blink, you'll miss it, is my point.
I think
so spend this time wisely, because the exercise I did with Taylor a few weeks ago when we were in here and we did it on the podcast, I got you to screenshot the prices, didn't I?
Yeah.
And I said, we'll get that screenshot up on the podcast in 2 to 3 months and we'll look back on it and we'll laugh.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can do the same thing right now. I can get you to screenshot Phantom at 70 cents. I can get you to screenshot Solana at $137. I can get you to screenshot Ethereum at 3,000, and I'm not guaranteeing, but I have a good feeling that, you look at that price in June or July and you go, I can't believe I was sitting there and I was worried about what Iran and Israel were going to do. I can't believe I was sitting there and I was following this guy on Twitter that said we were going to 40,000. I think what you need to do is just once again zoom out, look at it as a high time, get the monthly chart up. So, you look at it weekly and you go, fuck, 6 of the last 7 weeks. Look at the last 6 of the last 7 months. All green except for this. So what I'm going to be doing and what I'm focusing on is dollar cost averaging into gaming, AI, and runes plays in the next coming weeks.
Yeah.
And I think once we blow past these cobwebs, whether we get one final dip into that kind of 57 to 59,000 range, if it's slightly lower, it'll be 50 to 53. Don't think that'll come. But I'll be waiting for that. And I think once we do run and all those buys that have sold out now are forced to buy higher, you'll be incredibly surprised about how vertical and how fast we can do it as well.
90-day rule.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I'm calling 20 July to 20th of June. 20th of June to 20th of July. Game's on.
Yeah. Well said. So, just on that, that's what obviously our focuses will be on. But the Trading Academy, for those that don't know, is we have merged kind of our services, but really made the Trading Academy, which we have, a plethora of our clients on already, as a one-stop shop for crypto. Initially, this was always market analysis updates that gave you a overview of the market, both macroeconomically and the crypto market, but also altcoin updates, daily price action updates. But now we're going to include that to have research reports, live streams, video analysis, but more so we're going to introduce short-term plays, short-term spot plays. You guys have obviously heard me talk about the day trading course where I have students that I mentor and teach. But I'll be involving those leverage plays in the Trading Academy. So all of my clients are privy to not only short-term plays and being able to compound longs on riskier plays or whatever, but to be able to short the market as well in times of bearishness like right now. So in the last 6 to 7 weeks, they haven't been sitting on their hands. They've been able to actually put some money in their pockets and look at the market a bit differently. And this then extends to when we do get in a bear market and they've learnt that, okay, I don't have to just round trip my spot bags. I don't have to just sit on my miners. I can actually hedge on Bitcoin. Look to earn some money.
Yeah, exactly right. That's the thing. It gives you the ability to go up and down.
Exactly.
Like mining's long-term, as much as it's passive income, it's obviously looking at long-term stability, whereas being able to assess the market from a spot as well as a leverage perspective just gives you an overall holistic approach.
Yeah. Exactly.
Definitely what I'm doing.
So miner discussion.
Obviously mining update. Bitcoin is just obviously keeping us in our pattering phase. We're sort of starting to see potentially a little bit the wipeout we've been looking at in the sense of hash rate dropping off. We're sort of, for the first time in a few months, going down back below 600 exahash, which is sort of, roughly a 10 to 15% drop off from where we were about a week and a half ago. So we're obviously starting to see potentially a bit of that squeeze that we always see when it comes to post-halving, particularly with Bitcoin miners that are older generations. So, if you're mining out there, just obviously stand tall. You know what I mean? It's just that short-term squeeze. Beyond that, everything else is also relatively similar in the sense that we're seeing quite a bit of price action drop, which therefore can either lead to people switching around networks or dropping off. And so there's been quite a few drops overall. The biggest sort of change in the mining landscape at the moment has been script. Obviously, the new L9s that have been released to come out in the next sort of month or so has made pretty much every manufacturer panic and try and flog as much stock as possible when it comes to Gold Shell or anyone that's got small, maybe hobby miners for LTC or Doge. And so Doge has seen a roughly 30% difficulty jump in the past fortnight. So it's just everyone trying to get as much as they can. So if you're looking at buying one of those, I don't recommend doing it. Just hold off, wait till the L9s come out. L7s will drop in price, L9s will drop. Give it, I reckon, a month or two after they come out. Assess the landscape. Similar to what we've done when it comes to new releases like S21s. We only just got the S21s in stock. We waited until the price came down because when they first come out, they're $9,000. It's just not worthwhile. So try and understand, book in a call if it's something you're looking at. That's the best way that we've been able to try and help people, because at the end of the day, it's just about smart money. It's not dumb money. Yeah. But other than that, it's just that pattering phase. We're just waiting for things to settle and simmer.
Alrighty, well, that should set us off. Obviously, as we mentioned, next week we should be in a new setup.
Look out, the studio will be open.
Which will hopefully be a bit exciting. Obviously, if anyone is interested in any miners, please get in touch with Taylor from the Discord. But more so, if the new way the Trading Academy is going to run as a whole service, if that interests you, just reach out to Taylor or myself from the Discord as well. And we shall see you next week in our next setup.
Yeah, exactly right. And if there's any particular topics or questions anyone wants us to cover, just write it and tag us in the Discord. We want to make sure that you guys are getting more out of it than we're giving.
Exactly.
Sounds weird, but I like it.
Sweet. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.